My name is Darlene, and I am 63 years old. For 42 years, I shared my life with the most wonderful man I have ever known. Together, we built everything from nothing. Our son Brandon was our greatest pride, the child we prayed for the heir to our legacy. I never imagined that on the darkest day of my life, burying my husband, my own son, would break my heart even more. What I did next changed everything forever. Before I share what happened, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If stories about real-life family and the hard choices we sometimes have to make speak to your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. What you are about to hear is a story about love loss, betrayal, and the painful truth that sometimes the people closest to us can hurt us the most. Stay with me until the end, because this journey taught me something I will never forget. Let me take you back to where it all began, because to understand what happened, you need to know the love that built our family. I met Harold in 1982 at a job fair in Houston, Texas. I was 21 years old, fresh out of college, with a degree in accounting and a head full of dreams. He was 25, working as a real estate agent for a small company, wearing a suit that was slightly too big for his frame and a smile that could light up any room. Our first meeting was anything but romantic. Harold was carrying 2 cups of coffee, trying to navigate through the crowded hall when he bumped right into me. Hot coffee spilled all over my cream-colored dress, the only nice outfit I owned at the time. I remember looking down at the brown stain spreading across the fabric, then looking up at this horrified young man who kept apologizing over and over. He insisted on buying me dinner to make up for it. I told him that was unnecessary. He said he would not be able to sleep at night knowing he had ruined a beautiful woman's dress and her day. I agreed, mostly because I was hungry and broke, and partly because there was something in his eyes that made me curious. That dinner turned into another date, then another. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. Those 2 years were not easy. Harold was barely making enough to pay his rent, and I was working 2 jobs just to survive. But every Friday night, no matter how tired we would meet at this little diner on the corner of 5th and Main, share a plate of fries, and talk about our dreams. Harold wanted to start his own real estate company someday. He would describe it with such passion, his hands moving as he talked, his eyes shining. I would listen and believe every word, because when Harold spoke about the future, it felt real. It felt possible. We got married in 1984. Our wedding was small, just 30 guests, held in the courtyard of a little church on the outskirts of town. My dress was borrowed from my cousin. The flowers were picked from a neighbor's garden with permission. We could not afford a honeymoon, so we spent our wedding night in our tiny apartment eating leftover cake and dancing to the radio. During our vows, Harold looked into my eyes and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Darlene, I cannot promise you wealth or an easy life, but I promise you my whole heart, my complete loyalty, and a partner who will never stop trying to build something beautiful with you." 42 years later, I can tell you he kept that promise until his very last breath. In 1985, Harold took the leap. He quit his job and started his own real estate company. Our office was our garage. Our staff was just the 2 of us. I handled the books, the phone calls, the paperwork. Harold handled the clients, the properties, the endless driving from one showing to another. The first few months were brutal. There were weeks when we had no clients at all. We ate ramen noodles for dinner more times than I can count. I remember one night sitting at our tiny kitchen table watching Harold stare at a stack of unpaid bills. He looked at me and said, "Maybe this was a mistake." I took his hand and said, "We have not failed yet, and we will not." Our first sale came 3 months later, a small house on the east side of town. The commission was $2,000. When Harold came home with that check, he picked me up and spun me around the kitchen. We were so happy you would have thought we had won the lottery. From there, things slowly began to grow. It was not overnight success. It was years of hard work, sacrifice, and determination. We survived the real estate crash of 1990. While other companies folded, we tightened our belts and held on. Harold always said that crisis reveals character, and those hard times revealed ours. By 2000, our company had 50 employees and offices in 2 cities. By 2010, we had expanded to 3 states. By 2020, our company was valued at over $1 billion. We had built an empire, but More importantly, we had built it together. Harold never let me forget that. He called me his secret weapon, his partner, his best decision. But all the money in the world meant nothing compared to the joy we felt when Brandon came into our lives. I need to tell you about Brandon because understanding who he was makes what happened later even more painful. We tried for years to have a baby. After 3 miscarriages and countless tears, we had almost given up hope. Then, in 1991, 7 years after our wedding, I found out I was pregnant again. This time, something felt different. I was cautious, scared to hope, but also filled with a quiet certainty. Brandon was born on a rainy Tuesday in October. When the doctor placed him in my arms for the first time, I looked down at his tiny face, his eyes squeezed shut, his little fists clenched, and I felt my heart expand in a way I did not know was possible. Harold was standing beside me, tears streaming down his face. He kept saying, "He is perfect. He is absolutely perfect." And he was. Brandon was the sweetest child. He rarely cried, always curious, always wanting to learn. When he was 5, he would sit in Harold's office after dinner, pretending to work, shuffling papers around and speaking into a toy phone. Harold would watch him with such pride, already imagining the man his son would become. One memory stands out so clearly. On my birthday, when Brandon was 8 years old, I woke up to find a handmade card on my pillow. He had spent hours the night before, cutting and gluing and drawing. The card said, "To the best mom in the world, I love you more than all the stars." He had drawn a picture of our family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. I still have that card in my dresser drawer. As Brandon grew older, his interest in the family business became genuine. At 12, he started tagging along with Harold to property showings. He asked questions, took notes, absorbed everything. By 16, he was working summer jobs at the company, filing papers, answering phones, learning from the ground up. Harold insisted on it. He said, "No son of mine will inherit something he does not understand." Brandon graduated from business school with honors. He had offers from major firms in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. He turned them all down to come work for his father. I remember the day he told us. Harold tried to hide his emotion, but I saw him wipe his eyes when Brandon was not looking. For years, Harold mentored Brandon personally. He taught him everything, not just about real estate, but about integrity, about treating people fairly, about building relationships that last. Brandon seemed to absorb it all. He rose through the company, earning respect from employees and clients alike. Throughout it all, Brandon and I remained close. Even as a busy adult, he called me every single day, sometimes just for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He would tell me about his day, ask for my advice, share his worries and his wins. Those phone calls were the highlight of my days. Our life felt complete. Harold and I had each other. We had our son, we had the legacy we had built together. In the evenings, Harold and I would walk through our garden, holding hands like we did when we were young and broke and full of dreams. He would look at me and say, "We did good, did we not, Darlene?" And I would squeeze his hand and say, "Yes, we did." We talked about the future often. Harold wanted to retire at 70, hand the company over to Brandon, and spend his remaining years traveling with me. We made a list of all the places we wanted to see: Paris, Tokyo, the Italian coast. We were going to grow old together, spoil our future grandchildren, and look back on a life well lived. I was so certain of our happiness, so certain that nothing could break what we had built. I did not know that a single person could change everything. Brandon met Meredith in 2019 at a charity gala downtown. He was 28, successful, confident, ready to settle down. She was 26, working in public relations for a fashion company, beautiful in a way that demanded attention. When Brandon first told me about her, his voice was different. There was an excitement and intensity I had not heard before. He said, "Mom, I think I have met someone special." I was thrilled. My son was finally in love. The first time Meredith came to our home for dinner, I wanted so badly to like her. I spent all day preparing Harold's favorite pot roast, setting the table with our best china, making everything perfect. I wanted her to feel welcome, to know that she was becoming part of our family. They arrived 45 minutes late. When I opened the door, Meredith walked in without apology, simply saying, "Traffic was terrible," as if that explained everything. "No, sorry to keep you waiting. No, thank you for having me." Just that dismissive explanation. I noticed how her eyes moved around our home. Not with appreciation or warmth, but with calculation. She looked at the paintings on the walls, the antique furniture, the chandelier in the foyer. She was taking inventory, assessing value. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I pushed it away. I was being unfair, I told myself. I was being an overprotective mother. During dinner, Meredith asked many questions. How large was the company? How many properties did we own? What was the annual revenue? She asked very little about our family, our history, our values. When I tried to steer the conversation toward personal topics, she would give short answers and redirect back to business. After they left that night, Harold and I sat in the kitchen in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. That woman has ambition written all over her, and not the good kind. I wanted to disagree, but I could not. Something about Meredith felt wrong, but Brandon was happy, and I did not want to interfere. I told myself to give her a chance to wait and see. Over the following months, the changes in Brandon began slowly, so gradually, that at first I barely noticed. The daily phone calls became every other day, then twice a week. When I asked about it, he said he was busy. Meredith had introduced him to new social circles, new events, new opportunities. He did not have as much time. The first Sunday dinner he missed felt like a punch to my stomach. For over 10 years, we had gathered every Sunday without fail. It was sacred. But Brandon called that afternoon and said Meredith had made other plans. He sounded apologetic, but also defensive. Mom, I have to spend time with her too, he said. I understood, I told him, but understanding did not ease the ache. I noticed other changes. Brandon started dressing differently. Designer suits, expensive watches, Italian shoes. There was nothing wrong with nice things, but it felt like a costume, like he was becoming someone else. He talked differently too. He used words like brand and networking and image. He sounded like Meredith. He stopped coming to the office as regularly. When Harold asked about it, Brandon said he was exploring other investments, learning about new industries. Meredith thinks I should diversify, he explained. Harold bit his tongue, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Our 35th wedding anniversary came around. We planned a small dinner party at home, just family and close friends. Brandon promised to be there. He promised. He arrived 2 hours late. Meredith was not feeling well, he said. She had a headache. He could not leave her alone. He stayed for an hour, checked his phone constantly, then left early to get back to her. After he left, Harold sat down heavily in his chair. His face looked older than I had ever seen it. Our son is slipping away from us, he said quietly, and I do not know how to stop it. I tried to talk to Brandon privately a few days later. I asked him if everything was all right, if he was happy, if there was anything he wanted to share with me. He smiled and said, Mom, you worry too much. I am fine. Meredith is the best thing that ever happened to me. You will see. But I did not see. All I saw was my son becoming a stranger. The engagement came after exactly 1 year of dating. Brandon announced it over the phone, his voice triumphant. Meredith said, Yes, Mom, we are getting married. I congratulated him, of course. What else could I do? But Harold and I both felt it was too fast. We had only met Meredith a handful of times. We barely knew her family. Her parents were divorced. Her mother refused to have any contact with her. Her father was present, but distant, dealing with his own problems. The wedding was planned for 6 months later. Meredith wanted something grand. 400 guests, a 5-star hotel, the best of everything. When Harold offered to help with the planning, Meredith declined. We have got it under control, she said. We want to do this ourselves. The wedding cost $300,000. I later found out Brandon paid for almost all of it. Meredith's family contributed nothing. On the day of the wedding, I looked around the ballroom at all the guests. I recognized very few faces. Most of them were Meredith's friends, her colleagues, people from her social circles. Our family and friends were outnumbered 5-1. During the reception, Meredith gave a speech thanking everyone who helped make the day possible. She thanked her friends, her bridesmaids, the wedding planner, the caterer. She did not mention Harold. She did not mention me. She did not acknowledge the family her husband came from. Under the table, Harold squeezed my hand. His jaw was tight. I knew he was holding back words that would only make things worse. After the wedding, Brandon and Meredith bought a penthouse across town. It was far from our home, far from the company, far from everything we had built together. When I asked Brandon why they did not choose something closer, he said, Meredith wanted her own space. She did not want to live in anyone's shadow. The Sunday dinners became monthly, then occasional, then rare. Meredith always had an excuse. She was tired, she was busy, she was not feeling well, she did not like the drive. Eventually, Brandon stopped pretending there would be a next time. The dinners just stopped. I watched my son drift further and further away. Every time I tried to reach him, Meredith was there, a wall between us. She did not have to say anything cruel. She did not have to be openly hostile. She simply made sure that every moment of Brandon's time and attention belonged to her. Harold said it best one night as we lay in bed, unable to sleep. "She has not stolen him with force," he said. "She has done it slowly, like water wearing away stone." And by the time we noticed, it was already too late. I did not want to believe that. I could not believe that the little boy who made me birthday cards, who called me every day, who said he loved me more than all the stars, was truly gone. But as the months turned into years, hope became harder and harder to hold on to. In March of 2023, our lives changed forever. Harold had been coughing for weeks. I kept telling him to see a doctor, but he brushed it off. "Just allergies," he said. "Just a cold. You know how stubborn I am." But the cough did not go away. It got worse. And then came the fatigue. Harold, who had always been so energetic, so full of life, started taking naps in the middle of the day. He lost his appetite. He lost weight. I finally convinced him to see Dr. Stephen Hayes, our family physician for over 20 years. Stephen ran some tests and called us back in a few days later. I remember sitting in his office, holding Harold's hand, watching Stephen's face as he looked at the results. "I am sorry," Harold Stevens said. "The tests show lung cancer, stage 4. It has already spread." The words did not make sense at first. My brain refused to process them. Harold, cancer, stage 4. It was like hearing a foreign language. "How long?" Harold asked. His voice was steady, but I felt his hand trembling in mine. Stephen paused. 6 months, maybe 12, with treatment. I am so sorry." The drive home was silent. Neither of us knew what to say. When we pulled into the driveway, Harold turned off the engine but did not move. He just sat there, staring at the house we had built together, the garden we had planted, the life we had created. Finally, he spoke. "We will get through this together, Darlene, like we always have." That night, I cried until I had no tears left. I cried in the bathroom with the door closed so Harold would not hear. I cried for the future we would not have, the trips we would not take, the grandchildren he might never meet. I cried until my body ached. The next morning, I called Brandon. I tried to keep my voice calm as I told him about his father's diagnosis. I explained the stage, the prognosis, the treatment options. I expected him to say he would come right away. I expected him to drop everything and rush to be with his father. Instead, there was a pause. Then Brandon said, "That is terrible, Mom. I will come as soon as I can." "As soon as you can," I repeated. "Meredith has an important event tonight," he explained. "I cannot leave right now, but I will be there first thing tomorrow. I promise." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. Harold asked what Brandon said. I told him Brandon would come tomorrow. Harold just nodded. He did not say anything, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. Brandon arrived the next day, but he stayed for only 2 hours. Meredith kept texting him, asking when he would be back. He looked at his phone more than he looked at his father. As he was leaving, Harold called out to him. Brandon turned at the door. His father said, "I love you, son." Brandon nodded and said, "I love you too, Dad." Then he was gone. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. Harold started chemotherapy. He lost 20 pounds in the first 2 months. His thick, gray hair fell out in clumps. The man I married, so strong and vital, became thin and frail. I was by his side every moment. I held his hand during treatments. I helped him walk when he was too weak. I read to him when he could not focus on the television. I told him I loved him 100 times a day because I never knew which time might be the last. Brandon came to visit, but his visits were infrequent and short, every 2 weeks maybe. An hour here, 30 minutes there. He always had somewhere else to be. Meredith was waiting. Meredith needed him. Meredith had plans. Not once did Meredith come to see Harold. Not once did she call to ask how he was doing. When I mentioned this to Brandon, he made excuses. She is scared of hospitals. She does not handle illness well. She sends her love. Empty words, empty gestures. While my husband was dying, my daughter-in-law could not be bothered to show basic human decency. Harold's sister Caroline moved in with us to help. Eleanor, my best friend since college, came over every week with homemade meals and a shoulder to cry on. These women kept me going. Their love and support were the only things that made the unbearable somewhat bearable. One evening, Caroline and I were sitting in the living room while Harold slept upstairs. She looked at me and said, "How are you holding up Darlene?" "Really?" I told her the truth. I am watching my husband die, and I am watching my son become someone I do not recognize. I do not know which one hurts more. In August, we celebrated Harold's 67th birthday. It would be his last, though we did not say that out loud. I planned a small gathering at home. Family, close friends, the people who mattered. Harold was weak, but insisted on sitting in the living room surrounded by the people he loved. Brandon promised to come. He said he would bring the birthday cake. He said he would be there early. By 6 o'clock, all the other guests had arrived. No Brandon. By 7, I called him. He said he was on his way. By 8, still nothing. His phone went to voicemail. At 9:15, Brandon sent a text message. Meredith had an emergency. He could not make it. He was sorry. I did not show the message to Harold. I made up an excuse, said Brandon was stuck in traffic, that he would come tomorrow. Harold nodded, but I could see he knew. He knew his son was not coming. Later that night, after everyone had left, Harold and I sat alone in the darkness of our bedroom. He reached for my hand. "Maybe I failed him," Harold said quietly. "Maybe I did something wrong, and this is the result." I squeezed his hand so hard. "You did not fail him," I said. "He is making his own choices. This is not your fault." But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Where had we gone wrong? How had the little boy we raised become this man who could not even show up for his dying father's birthday? 2 months later, Harold made a decision. He called Walter, our family attorney, to discuss his will. The original will was straightforward. Everything would go to Brandon. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. Harold had always planned to pass the legacy to his son, but now Harold wanted to make changes. We sat together in his study, the three of us. Walter listened as Harold explained what he wanted. "I am not cutting Brandon out completely," Harold said, "but I want to add a condition. Darlene will have the final authority to decide if and when Brandon receives his inheritance." Walter looked at me. "Are you comfortable with this responsibility, Darlene?" I hesitated. Part of me still hoped Brandon would change. Part of me could not bear to give up on my own son. "Why?" I asked Harold. "Why do you want to do this?" Harold took a long breath. "Because I have watched our son choose his wife over his family again and again. I have watched him miss birthdays, skip dinners, show up late, and leave early. I have watched him become someone I do not recognize." He paused, gathering his strength. "If he continues down this path after I am gone, you will need to protect yourself. And maybe, just maybe, the possibility of losing everything will wake him up. I hope it will, but if it does not, I do not want him to have what he does not appreciate." Walter drew up the new documents. The will gave me complete discretion over the distribution of Harold's estate. I could give everything to Brandon, give nothing or anything in between. The choice would be mine. Harold signed the papers with a shaking hand. When he put down the pen, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "This is the last lesson I can give him," Harold said. "I hope he learns it, but if he does not promise me, you will be strong enough to do what needs to be done." I promised. I did not know then how soon I would have to keep that promise. November arrived cold and gray. The doctors told us Harold had days, maybe a week at most. We brought in hospice care, set up a hospital bed in the living room so he could see the garden he loved. I did not leave his side. I slept in a chair next to his bed. I held his hand while he slept, which was most of the time now. When he was awake, I talked to him. I reminded him of our first date, the coffee he spilled, the dinner that changed our lives. I told him about the trips we never got to take, describing them as if we had actually been there. Brandon came once during those final days. He stayed for 30 minutes. Meredith waited in the car outside because she was uncomfortable being around illness. 30 minutes for his dying father. When Brandon left, Harold opened his eyes. He had been pretending to sleep. A single tear rolled down his cheek. The last night, Harold seemed to rally. He was more alert than he had been in days. He asked me to sit on the edge of his bed, close to him. I held both his hands in mine. "Thank you," he whispered, "for 42 years of love, for being my partner, for building this life with me." I could not speak. The tears were falling too fast. "Be strong, Darlene," he said. "Whatever happens, be strong. I will be watching over you." He closed his eyes. His breathing became shallow. I stayed there, holding his hands, watching his chest rise and fall, willing him to stay just a little longer. At 3:17 in the morning on November 15th, Harold took his last breath. I felt his hands go slack in mine. I felt the absence of him sudden and complete, like a door closing forever. I sat there until dawn, unable to move. The man I had loved for 42 years was gone. The future we had planned together would never happen. I was alone. When the sun came up, I finally reached for my phone and called Brandon. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Mom." "What is it?" "Your father is gone," I said. "He passed a few hours ago." There was silence. Then Brandon said, "I will be there in the morning. Not now, not immediately. In the morning." I did not argue. I did not have the strength. I simply said fine and hung up. The next few days were a blur. Caroline arrived within hours, having driven through the night. Eleanor came with food and flowers. Marcus, our company's chief operating officer, handled the business notifications. Everyone rallied around me. Everyone except my son. Brandon finally showed up at 2 in the afternoon, a full 10 hours after I called him. Meredith was not with him. She had to prepare for an important event, he explained. I did not ask what event. I did not want to know. We planned the funeral for November 18th, 3 days after Harold's death. The service would be at the church we had attended for 30 years, followed by burial at the cemetery and a memorial reception in the evening. A full day to honor a man who deserved every moment. On November 17th, the day before the funeral, I was going over final details with the funeral home when Linda, our housekeeper of 25 years, approached me. "Mrs. Darlene," she said hesitantly, "I need to tell you something." I looked at her, exhausted. "What is it, Linda?" She wrung her hands. "Miss Meredith called earlier. She was asking Mr. Brandon if he would be attending her event tomorrow." I went very still. "What event?" Linda swallowed. "Her fashion showroom is having its grand opening. Tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow was the funeral." I felt something crack inside me. "Are you sure I asked?" "Yes, ma'am. She has been planning it for months. I heard Mr. Brandon say he would try to be there." I picked up my phone and called Brandon. When he answered, I asked him directly, "Is Meredith's showroom opening tomorrow?" There was a pause. Then, "Mom, she has been planning this for 6 months. She cannot just cancel." "Tomorrow is your father's funeral," I said. The words felt unreal coming out of my mouth. "I know." Brandon's voice was defensive. "I will be at the funeral in the morning. But the opening is in the afternoon. I can do both." "The funeral is all day," I said. "The burial, the reception. People will want to see you. Your father's friends, his colleagues. You are his son." "Meredith needs me there," Brandon said. "This is a huge opportunity for her career. You have to understand." "No," I said quietly. "I do not have to understand. What I understand is that your father is dead, and you are planning to leave his funeral early to go to your wife's party. It is not a party, Mom. It is a professional event." I hung up. There was nothing more to say. The morning of November 18th, I woke before dawn. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a woman I barely recognized. Grief had aged me a decade in 3 days. My eyes were swollen. My face was drawn. But Harold had asked me to be strong, so I would be strong. I dressed in black, a simple dress that Harold had always said he liked. I put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 40th anniversary. I took a deep breath and walked out to face the day. The church was packed. Over 500 people came to honor Harold. Business partners, employees, friends, neighbors, people flew in from across the country. The outpouring of love was overwhelming and beautiful. Brandon arrived at 9:45, 15 minutes before the service began. He was alone. Meredith had stayed home to prepare for her event. I watched my son during the service. He sat in the front row where he belonged. but his eyes kept drifting to his phone, checking the time, checking messages. He was physically present, but mentally somewhere else. Pastor Thomas delivered a eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes. He spoke of Harold's generosity, his integrity, his love for his family. He told stories from 30 years of friendship. The church was filled with the sound of sniffling and quiet weeping. When it came time for family remarks, Brandon stood and walked to the podium. He spoke for 3 minutes. His words were generic, rehearsed, hollow. There was no emotion in his voice, no tears in his eyes. He could have been giving a quarterly business report. I sat there watching my son fail his father one last time, and something inside me began to harden. After the church service, we drove to the cemetery for the burial. It was a cold, gray day. The wind bit through my coat, but I barely felt it. All I felt was the weight of loss pressing down on me. We gathered around the grave. Pastor Thomas said a few final words. It was time to lower the casket, time to say our last goodbyes. That was when Brandon pulled me aside. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "I need to leave soon. Meredith's event starts at 2. I stared at him. We had not even put his father in the ground yet. The casket was still suspended above the hole. Mourners were waiting to throw their roses. "You are leaving now," I said. "I have to," he said. "I will come back for the reception tonight if I can." "If you can," I repeated. "Mom, please. Do not make this harder than it has to be. You have plenty of people here. Meredith only has me." I looked at my son, this man I had carried inside me, nursed at my breast, raised with all my love. I looked at him and saw a stranger. "Go," I said. Brandon nodded, relief flooding his face. He did not notice the coldness in my voice. Or maybe he did not care. I watched him walk away from his father's grave. He did not look back. He got into his car and drove away while the rest of us stood there, waiting to bury Harold. Caroline came up beside me and took my arm. "Let him go," she said softly. "Focus on Harold. This is his day." She was right. So I turned back to the grave. I took a white rose from the pile and dropped it onto the casket. "Goodbye, my love," I whispered. "I will make you proud." The rest of the burial passed in a blur. People hugged me. They offered condolences. They told me how much Harold meant to them. I smiled and thanked them and felt nothing at all. Inside, I was already making a decision that had been forming slowly for months, maybe years, a decision that Harold had prepared me for. Brandon had made his choice. Now, I would make mine. The house was silent when I returned that evening. The memorial reception had been moved to a hotel nearby. I could not bear to have it at our home, not without Harold. I did not go to the reception. I told Caroline to make my excuses. I needed to be alone. I walked through the empty rooms, touching things Harold had touched, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his robe hanging in the closet, his favorite coffee mug in the kitchen. Everywhere I looked, I saw him. Everywhere I looked, he was gone. I ended up in his study, sitting in his leather chair, surrounded by his books and papers and the faint scent of his cologne. On his desk was the family photo I mentioned before. The 3 of us, Harold, me, and Brandon at 10 years old, all of us smiling, happy together. Where did that boy go, I wondered? What happened to him? I sat there for hours thinking about everything. The life Harold and I had built, the love we had shared, the son we had raised, and the choices that had led us here to this moment of profound loss and betrayal. Harold's last words echoed in my mind. "Be strong. Whatever happens, be strong." And his words about the will. This is the last lesson I can give him. I hope he learns it. But if he does not promise me, you will be strong enough to do what needs to be done. I had promised, and I had never broken a promise to Harold. The next morning, I called Walter. "I have made my decision about the estate," I told him. "Are you sure you want to do this now?" he asked gently. "You have just buried your husband. You might want to take some time." "I have had time," I said. "Months of time. I have watched my son choose his wife over his dying father again and again. I have watched him leave his father's funeral to attend a party. I am sure." Walter was quiet for a moment. "What would you like to do?" "I want to invoke the clause Harold added to the will. Brandon will not inherit the estate. Everything will go to the Harold Whitfield Charitable Foundation. Walter said he would prepare the documents. It would take about 2 weeks to finalize everything. He asked if I wanted to give Brandon any warning, any chance to change my mind. No, I said. He will find out when the will is read. After I hung up, I sat very still. I had just disinherited my only child, my son, the baby I had wanted so desperately, loved so completely. I had just taken away everything his father had built for him. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, and I knew it was right, but I also knew I owed Brandon one more chance. Not for the money. The decision about that was final, but for our relationship, for the possibility that somewhere inside him the son I raised still existed. A week after the funeral, I invited Brandon to come to the house. Just him. I said we needed to talk. He arrived looking uncomfortable. He had not been back since the funeral, had not called to check on me, had not even sent flowers. "Mom," he said as he walked in, "how are you holding up?" I did not answer that. I led him to the living room and asked him to sit. "Brandon," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay," he said, wary. "Do you know how much you hurt your father in his final months?" Brandon shifted in his seat. "Mom, I was there. I visited. I came to the funeral. You visited for an hour at a time when you came at all. You missed his birthday. You left his funeral to go to your wife's business event. You were there in body but never in spirit." Brandon's jaw tightened. "I did the best I could. Meredith needed me too. I cannot just ignore my wife." I leaned forward. "Your wife could not spare one day to attend your father's funeral. She could not make one visit to see him while he was dying, and you chose her, over and over at the expense of the man who gave you everything." Brandon stood up abruptly. "I did not come here to be attacked, Mom. Dad is gone. We cannot change the past. What is done is done. Can we please just move forward and talk about the will?" There it was. The real reason he came. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I looked at my son and saw clearly, perhaps for the first time, what he had become. A man more concerned with inheritance than with the father who had died. A man who viewed our conversation as an obstacle to get through, not a chance to reconnect. "We will discuss the will soon," I said quietly. "Walter is handling everything." Brandon nodded, satisfied. "Good. Just let me know when the reading is." "Meredith wants to be there." I did not respond to that. I just said, "You should go now, Brandon. I'm very tired." He left without hugging me, without saying he loved me, without any warmth at all. After he was gone, I went back to Harold's study. I looked at the family photo again, and I felt more certain than ever that I was doing the right thing. In the days that followed, I did some investigating. I asked Marcus to look into Meredith's background and finances quietly and discreetly. What he found confirmed my suspicions. Meredith had significant debt before she met Brandon. Credit cards, personal loans, and unpaid car note. All of it mysteriously cleared shortly after they started dating. She had dated 2 other wealthy men before Brandon. Both relationships ended when she failed to secure long-term commitment. Brandon had been her 3rd attempt, and he had succeeded where others had not. The fashion showroom she had opened, the one that was so important on the day of Harold's funeral, had been entirely funded by Brandon. $800,000. From accounts tied to our family company. I dug deeper. Brandon had withdrawn nearly $2 million from the company over the past year for personal projects. None of those projects had any documentation. The money had simply vanished into Meredith's ventures. My son had not just abandoned his family emotionally, he had been financially supporting a woman who was using him. It broke my heart all over again, but it also strengthened my resolve. The documents from Walter arrived for my signature. I read through every page carefully. The Harold Whitfield Charitable Foundation would receive everything: the company, the properties, the investments. All of it would go toward scholarships for underprivileged business students. Exactly the kind of opportunity Harold and I never had when we were starting out. I signed the papers and sent them back. With one signature, I had canceled my son's $1 billion inheritance. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vengeful. I felt sad, profoundly, deeply sad, and resolved to see this through whatever it cost me. The reading of the will took place 2 weeks after the funeral in Walter's office downtown. The room was formal, all dark wood and leather chairs, the appropriate setting for the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. I arrived early and sat at one end of the long table. Caroline sat beside me for support. We did not speak. We did not need to. Brandon arrived exactly on time, Meredith on his arm. It was the first time I had seen her since the wedding. She was dressed as if for a celebration, a red dress, gold jewelry heels that clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. She looked around Walter's office the same way she had looked around my home 3 years ago. Assessing, calculating. They sat across from me. Meredith smiled. "Hello, Darlene. I am so sorry for your loss." I did not return the smile. "Thank you," I said flatly. Walter cleared his throat and began. He read through the preliminary items, small bequests to employees who had been with us for decades, a donation to the church, personal items to various friends and family members. Then he reached the main section, the disposition of the estate, with regards to the primary assets of Harold Whitfield, including all real property business holdings and investment accounts. Walter read the deceased has granted full discretionary authority to his wife, Darlene Whitfield, to determine the final distribution. Brandon frowned. What does that mean? It means Walter continued that Harold trusted Darlene to decide who would inherit his estate. He signed this provision himself with full understanding of its implications. Meredith's eyes narrowed. So she decides. Not the will. The will gives her that authority, yes. Brandon turned to me. Mom, what is going on? I met his gaze steadily. Your father watched you choose your wife over your family for years. He saw you miss his birthday skip visits, check your phone during his final days. He wanted to give you one last chance to prove yourself. Brandon's face went pale. What do you mean, one last chance? I stood up. I needed to say this on my feet. On the day of your father's funeral, you left before he was even in the ground. You left to go to her showroom opening. You chose a business party over saying goodbye to the man who gave you life. Brandon started to speak, but I held up my hand. I have made my decision. Your father's estate will go entirely to the Harold Whitfield Charitable Foundation. You will receive nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched the color drain from Brandon's face. I watched Meredith's calculated composure crack, revealing something ugly underneath. She recovered first. You cannot do this, she said, her voice sharp. Brandon is his son. This is illegal. Walter spoke calmly. It is entirely legal. Harold's will explicitly grants Darlene this authority. The documents are properly executed and witnessed. There are no grounds for challenge. Meredith turned on me. This is because of me, is it not? You never liked me. You are punishing Brandon because you are jealous of our relationship. I looked at her with something close to pity. I am not punishing anyone. I am teaching my son a lesson his father did not live long enough to teach himself. Brandon finally found his voice. Mom, please. You cannot do this to me. I am your son. Yes, I said. You are. And I love you, but love does not mean enabling behavior that destroys families. Your father worked his whole life to build something meaningful. He wanted to pass it on to you. But you showed him again and again that you did not value what he offered. You valued her parties, her projects, her priorities, so she can support you now. I gathered my purse and looked at Caroline. She rose with me. Walter will send you the official documents, I told Brandon. And for what it is worth, I hope someday you understand why I did this. Not for revenge, for love. The kind of love that tells hard truths even when it hurts. I walked out of that office without looking back. Behind me, I heard Meredith's voice rising in anger, heard Brandon calling my name. I kept walking. Outside, the autumn air was cold and clean. I took a deep breath. The hardest part was over. Caroline took my arm. Are you all right? No, I said honestly. But I will be. The aftermath unfolded over the following months. Brandon and Meredith hired lawyers tried to contest the will. They lost. The documents were ironclad. Harold had made sure of that. Word spread through the business community. People talked. Most of them, surprisingly, were sympathetic to me. Many had been at the funeral. They had seen Brandon leave early. They understood. Robert Whitmore called me personally. Harold would be proud of you, he said. You did the right thing. Employees sent cards and flowers. The outpouring of support was unexpected and touching. As for Brandon and Meredith, their fairy tale quickly crumbled without the money to sustain it. Without the promise of a massive inheritance, Meredith's interest in Brandon evaporated like morning fog. Her showroom started failing without his financial support. Within 3 months, she filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences, the papers said. But we all knew the real reason. Brandon was no longer useful to her. Brandon lost his position at the company. Without being the heir apparent, there was no place for him. He had to find work elsewhere, starting over as an ordinary employee at a small real estate firm downtown. No corner office, no executive title, just a desk and a quota and the reality of life without privilege. For the first time in his adult life, Brandon had to take care of himself. I watched from a distance, waiting. Part of me hoped the hard lessons would reach him. Part of me feared he was too far gone to learn. A year passed. Seasons changed. The sharp edge of grief dulled to a constant ache. I learned to live with the absence of Harold, though I never stopped missing him. The charitable foundation became my purpose. We awarded our first round of scholarships to 12 students from low-income families, young people with big dreams and limited resources, just like Harold and I had been all those years ago. When I met them, shook their hands, saw the hope in their eyes, I felt Harold's presence beside me. This was his legacy. This was what mattered. Caroline eventually moved back to her own home, but we talked every day. Eleanor remained my constant companion, dragging me out of the house for lunches and walks and life. Linda continued to take care of the household, her quiet presence a comfort. I thought about Brandon often. I wondered how he was doing, whether he was surviving, whether he had learned anything at all. But I did not reach out. The next move had to be his. One afternoon, almost exactly a year after Harold's death, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. My name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter from Brandon. I sat down in Harold's study to read it, surrounded by his books and his memory. Dear Mom, the letter began. I have started this letter 100 times and thrown it away. I did not know what to say. I still do not know, but I need to try. The past year has been the hardest of my life. I lost my inheritance. I lost my job. I lost Meredith, and I know now that I deserved to lose all of it. When Meredith left, I was angry. I blamed you, I blamed Dad, I blamed everyone except myself. I told myself I was the victim, that everyone had turned against me unfairly. But then I had to start working again. Really, working for the first time since I was a teenager. I got a job at a small real estate agency. Entry level, commission only. I had to prove myself to people who did not care about my last name or my family money. It was humbling, and it was exactly what I needed. I started thinking about Dad, about how he started with nothing, about how he and you built everything from scratch. I never really understood that before. I took it for granted. I thought I deserved what you had built just because I was your son. I did not deserve anything. I see that now. I think about the day of Dad's funeral all the time. I think about walking away from his grave to go to Meredith's party. I cannot believe I did that. I cannot believe I was that person. I am so sorry, Mom. Not because of the money. I do not care about that anymore. I am sorry because I was not there for Dad when he needed me. I am sorry because I hurt you. I am sorry because I let someone else convince me that family did not matter. I know you might never forgive me. I do not know if I would forgive me, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did wrong, and I am trying to be better. I do not want anything from you. I do not expect anything. I just wanted you to know that the son you raised is still in here somewhere. He got lost for a while, but he is finding his way back. I love you, Mom. I always have. I am sorry it took me so long to show it. Your son, Brandon. I read the letter 3 times. By the end, I was crying. Not from sadness, from something else. Something that felt almost like hope. I did not respond right away. I needed time to process, to think, to pray. Harold had always said that time reveals truth. I wanted to make sure this truth was real. I waited 6 months. I watched from afar as Brandon continued to work to rebuild, to become someone different. He did not know I was watching, but I was. I asked Marcus to keep an ear out, and he reported back. Brandon was doing well. working hard, earning respect, becoming the man his father had always hoped he would be. Finally, 18 months after the funeral, I sent Brandon a message. I asked him to meet me at the cemetery. He agreed immediately. I arrived early and stood by Harold's grave. The headstone was simple, just his name, the dates and the words, beloved husband and father. I traced the letters with my finger. "He is coming, Harold," I whispered. "Our boy is coming home." I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I turned and saw Brandon walking toward me. He looked different, thinner, older, but there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Humility, awareness, pain that had been processed into wisdom. He stopped a few feet away, uncertain. "Mom." I did not speak. I just looked at him. This man who had hurt me so deeply, who had disappointed his father so profoundly, who had been so lost. Then I opened my arms. Brandon's face crumpled. He stepped forward, and I held him. My son, my child, the baby I had wanted so desperately all those years ago. He cried against my shoulder like he had not cried since he was small. "I am so sorry," he kept saying. "I am so sorry. I know," I said. "I know." We stood there for a long time, holding each other, grieving together. Then we turned to face Harold's grave. Brandon knelt down and placed his hand on the headstone. "I am sorry, Dad," he said. "I was not the son you deserved, but I am trying to be now." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Your father would be proud of you," I said, "not because of what you have, but because of who you are becoming." We stayed at the cemetery until the sun began to set. We talked about Harold, we talked about the past, we talked about the future, and slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild what had been broken. I did not change my decision about the inheritance. The charitable foundation would continue to receive everything. But I offered Brandon a job at the foundation, a low-level position with a modest salary. He would have to earn his way just like his father had done. He accepted without hesitation. Now, every week, Brandon and I have dinner together. He tells me about his work, about the students he has met, about the lives the foundation is changing. He is different, quieter, more thoughtful, more present. Our relationship is not what it was before. It is something new, something built on honesty and hard truths and the kind of love that does not give up, even when giving up would be easier. I still miss Harold every single day. I still talk to him sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep. I tell him about Brandon. I tell him about the foundation. I tell him I am trying to be strong just like he asked. And sometimes, in the stillness of the morning, I feel him there. A warmth beside me, a presence that never fully left. If you asked me whether I regret my decision, my answer would be no. I do not regret it for a moment, because that decision, as painful as it was, saved my son. It stripped away everything superficial and forced him to confront who he had become. It was the hardest gift I ever gave him, and it was exactly what he needed. Harold knew. That is why he gave me the power to choose. He knew that sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means letting someone hit bottom so they can finally look up. Brandon lost his billion-dollar inheritance, but he found something more valuable. He found himself. He found his way back to family. He found the strength to start over and become someone worth being. And I found peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did the right thing even when it hurt. The kind of peace Harold always said would come if I stayed true to myself and to what mattered. So that is my story. A story about love and loss, about betrayal and forgiveness, about the hard choices we sometimes have to make for the people we love most. If you are watching this and you are struggling with family, with difficult decisions, with people who have hurt you, I want you to know that you are not alone. And I want you to know that doing the right thing is not always easy. Sometimes it breaks your heart. Sometimes it costs you everything. But in the end, truth and love are stronger than lies and convenience. In the end, what matters is not what we have, but who we are and how we treat the people who matter most. Harold taught me that. And Brandon finally learned it too. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had to make a hard decision about someone you love? Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone and truly helping them, even if helping them meant causing them pain? I would love to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below. Let us talk about what it really means to love someone enough to tell them hard truths. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you are not already subscribed, I would be honored if you joined this community. We share real stories about real life, about the struggles and triumphs that make us human. Please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose heart might be touched, whose perspective might shift, whose family might be healed. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. I wish you and your family love, peace, and the courage to make hard choices when they matter most. Take care of each other, hold your loved ones close, and remember that it is never too late to come home. Until next time.